job searches, career changes, being able to afford retirement. Welcome to Retirement Solutions for All Ages. Today, I'm excited to have a guest host, Mike Dwyer, founder of Emplana. After a long career in private and public sectors, consulting stints with Ernst& Young, Deloitte Consulting, and a master's degree in management from Salvo Regina University, Michael Dwyer and a select group of advisors developed Implana, a career pathway. So please welcome Mike. How are you
Thank-
today?
Doing just fine. And having heard some of your episodes, I really am impressed and grateful to be part of it. Thank you, Ruth.
Well, I'm excited to have you here because one of the concentrations is the episodes are about for all ages. And we really have a dichotomy of philosophies and work habits when it comes to the baby boomer generation and the millennials and Gen X and younger. And I was very excited to learn that some of the things that you do are senior encore, where somebody retired maybe and doesn't have enough money for retirement and needs to get back into the workforce or rebrand themselves, and the younger generation and how they can fight back and get employment opportunities or start their own employment because that's the way a lot of them are going. So let me ask you, tell me a little bit about your company.
Well, thank you, Ruth. It really comes out of an ethic. Um, there's a big fight back theme to this. And the thought process began about 15 years ago. Ruth, I'm sure you're not 20 years old. I'm sure you get handed resumes and people say to you, can you give me some feedback, whatever. Well, somewhere back there, a friend and former client showed me a middle management resume. And what I found myself doing, the usual tweaks and words, but another thing was going on. My overactive nerd brain started saying, if you added this skill, and there's another question here, should you stay as a middle manager, or this was kind of a late career person, should you consolidate to a line professional, stretch to an executive? And I realized that these are things we should be collaborating on. This is what the conversation's about. How do I figure this out? How do I navigate? And it's reality versus dream too, right? How much maybe you want to go maybe you want to start the dog walking business so you can write the novel. I am 100% fine with that. If you can get by and you're making sense, go for it. But let me stop right there. So that's really what started the company, is that realizing that by joining together, building frameworks, being ready to help people, that you can dive into a conversation fast. That within the first hour, you're talking about what matters and what could happen.
Yeah, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, one of the big sayings is your network is your net worth because you really can't do it on your own. You have to have clients and customers or feedback and information. And that's what you do, right?
It is, and but you'll be delighted that I am always happy to get a new client. I'm actually putting a Calendly link on the website pretty soon that will let a free. Some of the time, just spending a 45-minute call with somebody is all we need. But I also want to be in this conversation with you to describe what we do, because I think some of your listeners, if they can pick up on how, they probably need to turn to you for the details of a reverse mortgage, something it's a financial instrument, it's complex. But I think if we talk through how you can form a personal board, how you can weigh your options, how you can do some self-assessment, I think a lot of your listeners will say, well, geez, I could do that, or I could do that with some colleagues, personal board members, etc.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you need professionals with experience to give you a sounding board or a reality check.
I agree, and I think there's a difference between what you do and I do. Um, I can easily see someone signing up for a series of 4 or 5 meetings to really navigate and personalize this. But I can also give a broad brush version of how people can get started on their own. I think listening to your reverse mortgage, you need the episode. You need to understand that. You need to turn to someone who knows the ropes. But let me start a little bit about, so what is it that people should do? Well, I think there's some personal work and some teamwork. Like you said, your net work is your net worth. So let's start with the personal and we'll move to the team. Personal front, especially for seniors, a little less so than for the new graduates and grad students, but certainly for seniors, you have a rich background that needs to be harvested. So what I have people do, I've broken this work up into a 5-day set of boxes. And what I want to see happen on Monday is you're looking through old projects, files, email sources. You know that human sound we make, huh, when we're intrigued and we realize something's possible? We want to be looking for, oh, yeah, that's right. I did do some event planning. Or, actually, I've facilitated board meetings before. I mean, it wasn't a full-time thing, but, and the reason you're looking through this reflection is obviously because you're looking for nuggets. And a lot of times you can think of a job as a molecule, but in today's world, you might want to break out some atoms and think about, could that be a freelance offering? Is this something I'd like to do? Put a sign over my door or whatever else. So I think you begin with that kind of a process. And then the way to continue that is to then turn to job boards or some of the freelance platforms like Upwork or Fiverr. And if something you know how to do, I know how to write public sector engineering RFPs, or I know how to do event planning for boards, whatever. If you see that out there as a service, barrier of entry is pretty low these days. I mean, really, at that point, what I'd be saying to someone in the conversation is, okay, who's an old friend or colleague that would actually give you that first testimonial or two that you can post out there? And obviously, you wouldn't start at the highest billing rate you see out there, but you could certainly put your toe in the water today. So that's one dynamic as you go from kind of personal background to looking at the outside world. But then the other one is kind of my favorite thing is the collaboration piece. And I see in the business press the concept of a personal board, but I don't usually see what I recommend, which is actually convening that group. Sure, you can approach them individually for advice and thoughts, but I've organized some sessions where you put somebody who knows the sector, somebody who knows you, somebody who's got, good professional services background, whatever is applicable. You put them in a room and add some coffee or bagels or whatever else, and you can go pretty far fast. Because the things you're looking for is to try and figure out what's emerging. What should I be studying? How should I be positioning? Is this all, Ruth? I appreciate your nod. I'm sure you have some experiences you could chime in with yourself.
Well, actually, I was thinking when you were saying that when I was broke and young, I used to do the focus groups where I'd get paid $85 and get dinner and sit there and they'd ask you questions and you'd watch maybe a commercial. And I think I actually was involved in naming an automobile, the Aviator.
Oh,
So,
yeah, the Lincoln, right?
yeah. So, yeah, I know that. And something else that you had mentioned earlier on, where you need other people. One of my past careers was as a party planner. And the thing was, most moms maybe have done one birthday party for a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old's a lot different than a 3 or a 4-year-old. And so, me going in and helping create these birthday parties, the moms could get really stuck because if they did it themselves, they might have three games and the kids decide they don't want to play that game. And then you have an hour and a half of what am I doing with these 20 kids? So it's kind of like that. Everything changes constantly, and you need people who are out there that know what's going on.
I love it. And those are great examples. Somebody I was talking to recently said, could you use this stuff on Etsy? And I thought, if you want to have a craft business, that's not my space. But by all means, if ever you should get an informational interview with someone who can quickly give you a sense of how it works. And one of the things in this, you and I have so aligned around networking. One of the things I stress, and you know Steve Dubin, he introduced us. Steve and I have actually done professional networking seminars in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And he's got some great tips about how to navigate the room, whatever else. One of the things I bring to the table is what I call the small ask. Don't tell somebody, get me a job. Tell someone, what should I be studying, or what technology is emerging in our sector. Those are flattering questions that people can join with. It's not going to put them off. It doesn't. There's no liability to it. And so I think, if what resulted was, well, you could be a party planner, or you could make some money doing focus groups for a little while. You trigger a thought in me. There's a wonderful market labor statistics company called Lightcast. And in some of their publications, they talk about a lifeboat job. And the example they give is a tax preparer. This is something that doesn't take you forever to ramp up. I mean, you got to be real and you got to pass the test and everything, but it's doable. And I think you could put somebody into the things you're describing and say, well, certainly to start off with some focus groups, raise your hand, see what's out there, because what you don't want to do is let time go by, you know, lose your momentum. I think getting out on the playing field is critical.
Well, it's funny. I know thousands of real estate agents, and life has been really hard for them. And oddly enough, some of them are doing better now that they have taken on a job as a server because they're meeting all these different people every day, multiple people. And so, yeah, getting yourself out there, even if it's, just for tips. You talk to people. You're not asking them to marry you that day. You're just asking, hey, get to know me because people do business with people they know, like, and trust.
I am delighted at this conversation. I couldn't agree more. And another thing too is my first job. My mom got me a job with the city when I was going off to college. My first job was in the summer after high school, picking up trash for the city of Somerville. And I think we should have zero stigmas. I think whatever you can do, you want to start a dog walking business, want to start an office cleaning business, don't hesitate. If you know something about it, feel confident, can think about, I would say do the spreadsheet. I think all of us, anybody who gets into something sometimes can imagine more P than L, if you know what I mean, in the profit and loss.
Right.
You got to actually lay out a spreadsheet. What would it cost me? What's staff, what's overhead, if can I do it myself, all those kinds of things. But I love already you and I are going back and forth, and this is what it's all about. So if you bring to the table some reflection and internal work that says, okay, I've sifted through, I've got, some harvesting of my past, and I'm bringing this forward. I'm looking out in the world. What does the world want? I'm chatting this up with my board, my personal board. I think you're creating momentum and possibility.
Well, I think what's important with what you do is the fact that everyone grew up in a different situation. I was really lucky that my dad was an entrepreneur, and let's see, which way do I point? I started a lemonade stand at age 4. I was the top Girl Scout cookies salesperson, so I knew all about building a business from a young age. But most people don't get that from their families. Their family is working 40 to 80 hours a week. They're not talking about business or finances or anything around the dinner table. and they don't even know where to start. And that's where you come in, Mike. You give them the ability of to know where to start, even whether they're fresh out of high school or have had 40 years of a career and need to get back into it. Everything has changed, and you need somebody that can help you walk through those changes.
Thank you. One example I give is working with seniors because as an over 65, I never left the workforce. And my day job, my consulting business, I'm working on cybersecurity, cloud computing, you know, really go-go stuff, and very comfortable with tech. I come out of the tech sector. So what happens as we work with, especially our seniors, you want to run through a little assessment phase that says, okay, are you good with collaboration tools? And I don't care if you use Teams, Google Suite, that's not the point, Slack. But if you know how to do that stuff, great. But if you don't, I'm all about possibility, and I think you are too. One of the things I say is don't be reading about something, download a trial, and organize a golf tournament with a buddy on Slack. That's how you go about it. Um, there's usually a trial version of anything, or you can put the short term $20 a month El Cheapo. But that can take you from an outsider looking in, and I think that's particularly important with AI now. Um, my experience is that anything I have to build for a client, put together a program management office for that new software implementation. I mean, ChatGPT is going to give, and Claude or whatever else, it's going to give me 4 pages of good stuff. I'm going to sit down and put on my Deloitte consulting hat and say, a little less of that, a little more of this. Ooh, I want to see something else. But we want to be comfortable with those tools, whether they're collaboration tools or some of these AI helpers. We want to embrace them and move in as opposed to being afraid.
Well, let's change routes a little bit. Um, Somebody puts together a resume and they're trying to get it out there and they can't get past the bots. Every employer is getting tens of thousands of resumes, and it's like, how do you break through?
Well, I do have something to say about that. As somebody who spends time, and I hire interns and grad students from time to time, so I'm so lucky. I live in a co working space with 300 companies. I work with the Suffolk University Career Office here in Boston doing job shares. And I watch brilliant MBAs show me how they tweak the cover letter. Look, here's 3 versions I spread out on the co working space table. And I still only got one callback out of 77 submissions. Now, what I'm reading in the business press, if you really want to see how insane this is, I'm seeing in the Wall Street Journal how employers are miffed that candidates are using AI to spruce up their resume. So we are involved here. We need to be careful to understand this is a bad game. If candidates are feeling discarded and employers are saying you're cheating, that's not we might put a little bit of our portfolio, a little bit of our energy or time budget there, but not a lot. Um, Again, mentioning Steve Dubin, he and I were in a conversation about I have this new topic I'm working on called topical networking. So I need to know a skill, and I could take it online from a LinkedIn course, and he finished my sentence. I can drive 80 miles to go find a meetup, and meet real people who do it. Which do you do? The latter, because you've got to get to human beings somehow, and do that through that personal board. Do it by using topical networking. That when you can show up and say to somebody, "Hey, look, I'm genuinely interested in this. I'd like to learn more. How can you help? Where should I go?" Very few people aren't flattered, and any tips you get are going to create direction and momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, sometimes it's not a job. It's doing things on your own. A lot of the people I know are self-employed, whether it's by choice or default. gig worker economy. You pulled up a wonderful statistic about the different generations and using the freelance model and how much of an impact that has had on society and careers.
Yes, and one other observation I'll share with you is that somebody, again, we all network. Somebody pretty smart in my circle put me on to an age study of clients, and this was a number of years ago, and it was really good. I'm an Excel guy, so I actually put a guesstimate on ages, and it turns out that there's activity at age 30, age 45 to 50, and then senior. And that makes complete sense to me. I've got 10 years under my belt. I think I know something. I want to look around. The other thing, though, is a number of people I know in financial services in the 45 to 50-year-old or thereabouts age cohort tell us I made more money 10 years ago. It's so competitive now. It is hard out there. So you do want to be, I think we need to be realistic, not dismal or discouraged, but scrappy. That we want to start thinking about, well, hey, wait, actually organizing birthday parties is kind of fun and you can make some money at it.
Yeah, it was the best job I ever had. I had worked corporate for a while and I left the corporate world because the big word back then was think outside the box. So we're at a big corporate company meeting and the vice president of the company goes, "We need to think outside the box, except for Ruth. We need to get her in the box." And that's when I was like, I'm in the wrong place. And I started my business, which I actually wrote my business plan when I was 10 years old, and I hadn't thought about it. And so I think that's something, and even Mark Cuban talks about you want to be an entrepreneur. You want to have that mindset. You want to start your own business and start on a shoestring. Don't go getting, venture capitalists. Just go out and do it. Be scrappy.
Well, I love it, but I also want to speak to your less confident audience.
Right.
Clearly, you're blessed with a "let me try this." No, take the choke off the motorcycle kind of persona, and that's great, Ruth. One of the things we put together. Remember, I told you we'd done some really special work, or some really focused work around professional networking. One of the things that I ask people to do, I put a little somewhere in my stuff is a little multicolored table that describes sort of the degree of script and organization. And let me give you a quick sense of that table. So if you go to a lecture with a Q&A afterwards, that is very safe and easy to navigate. And if you bring someone who's an extrovert, you're done. You're home free. Now, contrast that. I mentioned that I operate in a co-working space. It's called Cambridge Innovation Center. I'm at the Boston location. The Cambridge location in Kendall Square, this is all MIT spinoffs and stuff. They have this thing called Venture Cafe Thursday night that you'd do fine. It's a bunch of sure-footed entrepreneurs, service providers. It's wicked amped up. That is not the first place to try your networking if you're an introvert or shy. But you can get there. And the way you get there is by going to things, by being a little selective. The word I do in a lot of this, and I'm sure you'll agree, is intentional. If you say to yourself, boy, that feels like a huge jump to my personality, then ease into it with something that's orchestrated. Like I say, if you go to that, something, a seminar about your field, and then there's Q&A afterwards, you don't really need a super amount of brain power or chutzpah to navigate that session. And after you've done a few of them, because then you go like to my friend Steve Dubin, who has run commercial networks, okay, multiple. He is all about this stuff. He loves it. Then you get to a point where you're saying, okay, how many minutes am I going to give each person? What am I looking for? You get to a point where you're prepping. Here's a couple of companies or persons I want to catch beforehand. Does this all sound familiar, Ruth?
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
My
If you go to,
advice,
go
my
ahead, please.
advice for the introvert as well as the extrovert is Toastmasters. Someone like me, I might not shut up. And, I need to, listen more than I talk, and I might have the energy. So, Toastmasters slowly progresses you into a back and forth. So if you're really shy, it's like, how can I, speak up and sound professional and build my confidence? And I just think Toastmasters is wonderful because that's another way of networking. Everyone at Toastmasters has a different expertise, and they just want 2 to 7 minutes of your time. You are asked a question and you have 2 minutes to answer it. You prepare for, weeks to do a 7-minute speech. And it really is advantageous regardless of if you're shy or over exuberant.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth. I mean, that sort of business of a self-assessment and being open to feedback, um, I do think you want in your personal board somebody who knows you well enough to push back. You want to get somebody who's, if not a leading light in the sector, sure-footed. One of the university career offices, in fact, I graduated from Salve Regina in Newport, Rhode Island, and the career officer there has really done some nice work around the informational interview. That, that's a relatively small ask. You're still asking for a chunk of someone's time, but the outcome is they don't have to do anything. They don't have to particularly prepare. They don't have to follow up or have homework or get you an interview or something. What they do is they explain to you what they've seen in their sector, what they've seen work, who gets ahead. That is worth its weight in gold, of course. And that is navigable, whether it's through Toastmasters, finding a group, and I think everything's up for grabs. I think we should be on this, even though the job market's dismal. I recommend this kind of upbeat sense of shopping. I am looking for people to play with, people who know something, people who want to chat it up. And I just think that's so good for us to be involved in those processes.
Yeah, just recently I heard that the younger generation is starting to use LinkedIn more for just professional, that they're using it in place of Instagram and TikTok, that it goes back to, people like and trust. And they're just, the network is there and it's just getting to know people. And that's how they're using something like LinkedIn now, because something like Indeed, back in my day, it was Monster. I'm not
Sure.
even sure who the other big employee boards are. It's like, it's, you're just, bits, you're zeros and ones in a computer system. You're not a human.
I thank you, and I love you brought up LinkedIn. I read an article from someone that, on a post, and I was so impressed. I actually organized a few thoughts. And what she's a freelance writer, and she actually worked for LinkedIn for a while. But I responded and said, "Well," and I'm connected to her now. And another thing about LinkedIn, I worked with somebody literally decades ago, but I really respected them. They were just a very strong, they were in finance and accounting. And boy, they knew their stuff. When you got to them, you got the answer. And I recently saw them get a big job as a deputy insurance commissioner out west. And I got back in touch after, I don't know, 27 years or something. It wasn't hard at all because that fundamental relationship is still at play. And it turns out, the person knew some things about Boston. But I really do agree with you. And I wanted to offer a couple of examples where things I've done recently where I've reached out because I just love somebody's work, or I've reached out because someone I had some significant admiration for was moving, and I really wanted to weigh in and offer them a knowing congratulations, not just a, and it's really not that hard. I mean, for somebody again, Ruth, getting your extrovert in 2 moves on the game board, But I think for anyone, if you just take a minute to think about, just compose it in a way that's safe for you, that just says, hey, I'd like to follow up, or I'm interested. Is there anything else you've done I should look at? Those kinds of things make a good approach.
Well, Mike, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really think we have done a lot of advice giving for those listeners. And to our listeners, if you know somebody that might appreciate some of this information, please forward the podcast to them. And of course, hit subscribe. And I just want to thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time and everyone else for listening.
Well, thank you. And thanks for joining in just so well. Perfect. And we just have to assure your listeners it wasn't scripted.
Not at all. So, retirement solutions for all ages. I do hope we helped all ages.